I won't spoil the story. I'll let Jim tell the story.
Thanks very much, Howard, and I'm pleased to be here today to introduce Relocalize. So the issue that we're talking about is the global supply chain and how we've recently become aware of how complex it is. But when we talk about the area of food and beverage, our most basic human needs, it seems even more out of sync to have a complex food chain with the aspects of values related to freshness or farm to table or sustainability. You have to ask yourself the question, the supply chain that we have for turning heavy metals into microchips into our iPhones and shipping them around the world, is that the same supply chain we want to see for the nourishment that we take into our own bodies? That can't be the case. And Relocalize has a view that there's much better and more efficient solutions. They've taken an engineering look into the value chain process, thought of ways that we can automate aspects of it and move it closer to the consumer, and very importantly, validated that model with an experienced group of advisors, not me, those that are experienced in the food and beverage supply chain. So let me hand it over to Wayne and let him talk to you about his vision as CEO for Relocalize.
Great. Well, thank you, Jim, and thank you, Howard and Nick. Looking forward to seeing you in person next week, and happy to be here today. I'm just going to throw up quickly my presentation here right now. Let me swap those. All right. Hopefully, you're all seeing my presentation now.
We are.
Great. All right. So I think Jim said it really well, right? I mean, our supply chain is extremely complex, and it's frankly, it's failing both retailers and consumers. These retailers and consumers are evolving extremely quickly, right? At the same time, the supply chain is not evolving with them. If we just look at the last couple of years, 2021, there was a 30% increase in retail pricing from shrinkflation, smaller packages, and inflation, higher pricing. $82 billion in lost grocery sales just in the US in 2021 from stockouts alone. And, you know, when I spoke with some of the executives from one of the largest C stores, convenience chain stores in North America, actually globally, they said actually they were less concerned about the lost sales than the loss of customers. Because when a customer goes to for example, to a convenience store to pick up a bag of packaged ice, and that ice is not there, they're extremely frustrated, and they went there for a specific reason, to get that bag of ice. And they are actually afraid of losing that customer lifetime value. At the same time, consumers want sustainable products, yet they can't get it from the supply chain they have. There are some options, mostly premium, but most of the grocery store is stuck in the supply chain of the past. So, you know, this is the supply chain right here. This is the complexity problem that we're dealing with, right? And when you look at this problem, what do you see? You see a packaged food chain that has ingredients, a trip from ingredients through to the consumer of up to 20,000 miles. It's a lot of food miles. There are 20 steps in this process, from production, packaging, palletizing, loading, unloading, all the way through to selling. And many of those steps exist only to get the product from A to B, not to add value for the customer. And finally, when we talk about, say, packaged ice or packaged beverages, about 50% of the cost of the retailer of the products they're putting on their shelves is eaten up by that supply chain. So Relocalize, we truly believe that eliminating the chain from food and beverage supply with microfactories is the answer. Now, it's not the answer for every market, but it's an answer for some very critically important markets. So the first step in relocalization is localization, right? When we look at innovators like Plenty, they're really leading the way here. I love what they're doing. I love the fact that I can buy lettuce in near my home, not only from California. No offense to all you folks from California, but I'd like my lettuce to come from closer to home. So love what they're doing. But the second step is simplification and hyper-localization. Now, this is not economically feasible for lettuce, but there are markets where this is possible, such as packaged ice and beverages. And so what does that mean when we say simplification and hyper-localization? This means we're taking microfactories, doing all the jobs of the value chain in partnership with the retailer, right in that micro factory, and we're doing it at a distribution or fulfillment center, so there's no middle mile. So when we talk about a microfactory, just, I'd like to introduce you to ours. This is an autonomous microfactory. It's the very first microfactory for food and beverage, retail food and beverage. And it needs only 640 square feet outside or inside a distribution center or fulfillment center to serve up to 200 stores with packaged ice and packaged beverages. It performs all those value chain tasks: palletizing, processing, packaging, food safety and compliance, although maybe not quite as well as could be done with some others, like our previous startup, warehousing and inventory management. So it all happens inside that box. So what happens when you take this complex supply chain and you relocalize it in the way we're talking? What you end up with is a one-step journey from production to table. This is a hyperlocal food supply system. 65% fewer supply chain steps means lower risk, lower cost. There are only 2 actors involved. No food services company, there's no contract manufacturing, no 3 different logistics companies. There are only 2 actors, Relocalize and the retailer. And there's 0 food miles upstream of that fulfillment center or distribution center. So our first microfactory is going to Florida at this DC right here. It's a 125-acre DC, 175 plus loading docks, 1,000 trucks, more than 1,000 trucks come and go each day. And this microfactory sits on that little white sliver you're seeing right there, which is a concrete pad for the microfactory. Just to give you a sense of how this is going to work, this microfactory makes packaged ice, and it's branded, and it's an own brand product for the retailer. And when we went down there to figure out how do we integrate with them, it was a 1.5-hour meeting at this distribution center with all the operations folks. And in that 1.5 hour, we picked the location, we planned the connections and how to get the electricity and other things we needed to a microfactory. And we figured out the operational integration into distribution center operations. 1.5 hours, done. This is a plug and play system, and it injects directly into the way they operate. It just makes their lives simpler by removing ice from the distribution center cold storage, and by removing the trucks that would normally come and go and simplifying the distribution center operations. So we're starting with packaged ice and packaged ice and beverages for a reason. The reason is pretty simple. Putting water on trucks is environmentally and economically insane given the cost of logistics and the carbon footprint. Ice is water plus energy plus packaging, and beverages is water plus concentrates plus packaging. It makes absolutely no sense to be doing this at a national level or even a regional level. It needs to be done at a hyper-local level. When we talk about our beachhead, which is packaged ice, that's where that first microfactory is. Packaged ice is a surprisingly big market. Most people see this and are like, wow, $6 billion packaged ice. I had no idea. But yes, it's about the same size roughly as the packaged lettuce market. And $6 billion market is unique though. It's dominated by 3 geographic monopolists. These geographic monopolists have almost all of the relationships with the larger grocery and convenience store chains. And they have very weak relationships with them because they don't actually, they've always been monopolies. So they've never really built relationships with them. And in fact, in the last 2 years, they've taken advantage of their monopoly position and frankly angered their grocery and convenience store chain customers. So this beachhead market is also very dependent on logistics, and their business model, the key KPI for their business model is route density. How many stops is a truck making? So when we look at what we're doing, we're completely separating ourselves from logistics and the cost of logistics. So not surprisingly, we don't want a slice of that $6 billion market. We want the majority of that $6 billion market. So it's great to have a fantastic market and a new technology and be a first mover, but without a killer value proposition that delivers value right away, well, you're not going to scale quickly and you're not going to attract customers quickly. So we're fortunate that we have exactly that, in particular for ice and beverage. So we're talking about up to 90% reduction in transportation CO2. We're talking about eliminating middle mile upstream of distribution and fulfillment. We're talking about reducing the wholesale cost of the products for retailers. We're talking about reducing distribution operating costs up to 80% for warehousing and pallet building. And we're talking about reducing retail operations costs associated with receiving, stocking operations, and waste by 55%. Just to give you a little bit of detail on one of these, shrink is a big part of retail cost. For packaged ice, it's 10% because of all the touches in the process. There are about 8 touches in the process. Whereas what we're talking about is no human touch, or perhaps 1 human touch in the whole process. And so our launch partner, they've estimated that they'll go from 10% to less than 5%. We think significantly less than 5%. And this is in an industry that counts pennies and fractions of percents. So when you look at our value proposition, we're talking about, at least a 20% total cost reduction, which is massive numbers for retail. We're talking about ESG impact in carbon reduction, and we're talking about really close strategic alignment, because all of these retailers, whether you're talking about Kroger, Walmart, Costco, and everyone else, they're all moving big into own brands, in particular own brands for beverage, and ice is one they're thinking about right now as well. And so we're really touching their strategic goals operationally and for value chain capture as well. So again, great to be a first mover, great to have a full value chain opportunity with a massive recurring revenue potential, but how do we capture it? We need the right business model. The right business model is a service model. And so here we're looking at the economics around a single microfactory for packaged ice. So there's an annual fee of $480,000. This annual fee is on a long-term contract and comes before the equipment is deployed, which makes it easy for us to raise non-dilutive capital. And then there's per unit fees, 40 cents per unit for each package of ice that's delivered. At a 75% utilization, that's $480,000. And then there are additional services for the jobs that we're doing that are distribution jobs. So we're looking at about 1.1 of ARR from each microfactory in this market. So what kind of traction have we had to date? So just to make it clear, we're pre-seed funded only. So we're only a year and a half old. We built that first microfactory. We're very excited about that. But even though we're really early stage, we've had some fantastic traction. And it's really because, very simply, the value proposition is so strong. They're already thinking about ice and beverages own brand. And they've been facing a ton of supply chain challenges. So as a result, we've got a launch partner in the Southern United States. We're deploying there our first microfactory in Q4. We'll be serving 71 of their stores at launch. Now, this is a big deal in retail for food and beverage, because typically they'll start with one store and try things out. They're so confident with the product and they're so confident with the business model that we're going straight to 71 stores. And there's more than 500 stores at this launch customer retailer that we can tap into later after we execute. So we'll need to put in more microfactories, but ultimately that's a $6 million ARR opportunity just with the launch customer. And we're currently engaging with 6 other major chains, 5 of the biggest retailers in North America, top convenience chains. And the total ARR potential just for those folks we're talking to right now is $250 million of ARR potential in this market. How did we get here so quickly? How did we build that business model and validate this from the retailer through CEO all the way through to category manager? We did it thanks to a great team. And Jim already talked about this, but this is the team that made it happen. We have deep retail knowledge at all levels. We have a full stack team on equipment, and this is what's made it possible to move so quickly. So we see ourselves reaching positive ARR of 750,000 in 2023, quickly growing to 30 million of ARR by 2025. Of course, committed ARR at that point would be a lot more because we get the contracts before we build the machines. We expect around that time period to have 70 million in committed ARR. Right now, we're raising a $3.5 million seed round to accelerate product development, deliver for our launch customer, and get ready for scale. We've already raised a 1.6 million pre-seed round from the folks on the previous slide. So I'll leave you with one last thought. I think, here really we've got major tailwinds behind us. Why is this moving so quickly? Why is it moving so strongly? Why are we so confident that we're onto something important? First of all, I think own brand. 20% of grocery store products are already own brand that are sold. All right, and this is a massive shift, and it's growing very quickly because grocers and convenience store owners see private label as their future. They need to build loyalty, and they want both the premium and they want the budget end of the spectrum. To give you an example, I talked to the president of one of the largest meat packaging companies relatively recently, And I said, what is it that keeps you up at night? And I asked him that good old cliche question. And he came back to me saying something that surprised me. I thought he was going to say it was going to be alternative protein, but no, he sees that as an opportunity. His biggest fear is that grocers are going to get into chicken. And so this is exactly what we're doing. We're helping grocers get into ice and specialty beverage in a big way. The other trends, localization, inflation, which only helps us because we're automated robotics, and no logistics, sustainability, supply chain disruption. They're all helping us support our mission, which is very quickly to relocalize as much of the food and beverage supply chain as we can. Thank you.
So I have a question.
Yes, Howard. I thought you would.
Surprise, surprise. So Wayne, could you talk a little bit about the transition from ice to beverages? Because, you know, it sounds like you're doing only ice right now, but your bigger target is beverages. And you've kind of shown your hand a little bit already by saying, you know, you're going to target the own brands as opposed to, you know, presumably big independent brands, CPG brands. But how, you know, so maybe what that means is you're going to be, you know, hopefully supplying, you know, Costco with Kirkland beverages or something, you know, something along those lines. I mean, so in an ideal world, you'd be having your trailers inside the Costco parking lot along with their gas station or something. But what would be your ultimate relationship with Coca-Colas of the world or other CPG brands that might be out there?
I think it's a great question, Howard. And I think, you know, we're really focused on creating maximum value for retailers, right? Our goal here is to capture as much of the value chain as we can in partnership with retailers. And so, you know, Coca-Cola is a mass market product. I think that's really why we're looking at specialty beverage as a good number 2 position, right? Specialty beverage is more niche. It evolves more quickly. It's not a Coke, right? It's the new functional beverage, things of that sort that evolve very quickly. The retailers already have plans for those, right? And so this is where we're supporting them in their existing business model. And when I think about it from a technology perspective as well, the stack that we're building is 80% platform, 20% ice. And that 20% ice is designed to be pulled out and be replaced with 20% specialty beverage, right? And so we have a roadmap on the beverage side, but you know, frankly, when you have an opportunity as fantastic as ice, you know, $6 billion, you know, the classic market ready for disruption, and you have retailers who want to help you displace the existing market incumbents, that's going to be our focus for a few years. We've got a ton. You know, we've got hundreds of millions of ARR opportunity just with ice to chase before we turn our focus to specialty beverage.
Wayne, if I may, I mean, 6 billion should keep you busy for a while. I accept that, but again, following up on the beverage piece, how do you keep Coca-Cola from watching what you do with ice and saying, hey, we can do that with our own product and eliminate bottling plants, improve our ESG scores, have a new branding as a greener company? Do you have IP that can, it's not immediately obvious to me how you build a moat around this.
That's a great question, Ronald. I think that the moat here is interesting. So when you look at, say, for example, packaging machines, whether you're talking about packaging machines in beverages or packaging machines anywhere else in the food industry, they're designed for a specific purpose. They're designed to be large footprint. They're designed for centralization. They're designed for throughput. What we're building is a whole new type of technology that's designed for small footprint, that's designed for reliability, that's designed for maintainability, and that's designed not to fail in the field. And if it does fail, self-correct. So this is all greenfield IP. What's interesting, so one of our board members, he's big into automation. They're one of the biggest suppliers of retailers and food companies of automation in the world, and Group President is our investor. He looks at us and says, yeah, none of us are doing this. Why aren't we doing this? We're not doing this because nobody's asked us to. right? And so they're not even focused on building that IP. And so the great news for us is we're building new IP every day. We already have a patent issued on the ice making process. And who knew there was a new way to make ice? We'll be doing the same thing on the beverage side as well.
So this will be equipment design patents predominantly?
Yeah, so it's
Okay.
manufacturing process patents, it's equipment design patents, and in some cases, it'll be some pretty core IP. Obviously, it's going to YouTube. We won't talk too much about that right now, but there's some methods that we use in our manufacturing processes that are completely out of the box thinking that are only available because there's no people in the box. So we have some really the opportunity to really reinvent how you manufacture, because again, small footprint, completely different location, removing logistics, and at the same time, there are no people in the mix. And that opens up a lot of interesting doors from an intellectual property perspective.
Got it.
Mhm.
Hey,
Thanks.
Wayne, I had a question. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Ronald. Are you done?
I'm done. Thank you.
Oh, okay. So how do you compare yourself to companies, I think they're like Icehouse America, that,
Mhm.
that have these small compartmentalized drive up ice machines all over the Midwest and the South, where you just drive up and you get ice? I mean, isn't that the same kind of, I realize they're going out to the individual like consumer, you drive up and you get it, but I mean, and I don't know to what extent they have smaller ice plants that provide B2B, but like, how is that different than what you are doing?
A fantastic question, Max, and completely different. When you talk about store level technologies, or when you talk about vending machine technologies, these technologies are not made to make packaged ice. So they make ice. Ice is easy to make. We all make it in our freezers. The challenge of packaging ice is putting it into a package so that it doesn't stick together and fuse into a large ball. It's also a question of food safety and meeting grocer standards. So vending machines, it's a whole different world. And if you look at, for example, people who've tried to do store level technologies with automation to make true packaged ice, one of the the biggest two market leaders tried to do this. They failed and have failed. They're pulling their systems from the market, even though they're the second largest ice producer in North America. And all the other companies that have gone bankrupt in that space is because you just can't do the job when you're only making several thousand bags of ice. By being at a DC, we're at a micro industrial scale, but it's still an industrial scale. So we can bring all the high tech capital to bear needed to do this, but it's still efficient enough that we can make an extremely profitable product. You just can't do that at store level. And a vending machine is a completely different product. It's meant to go straight into your cooler. If you put it into your freezer, it'll freeze as a block.
Okay, thanks.
Mhm.